r/NoSleep. Posted by you/The Dangerous. If you think there's something in the darkness, don't shine a light on it. It was late, pitch black outside, and I was in my bed, blanket up to my neck. I couldn't fall asleep, which was something that almost never happened to me. Especially not when my entire body was exhausted and begging for rest. When my eyes were so dry they hurt, and my blanket felt so warm and comfortable. But it happened that night, and no matter how much I tried, my mind wouldn't shut off. I opened my eyes that weren't giving of that itching sensation anymore. Too tired to move, I looked around the room, trying to satisfy the boredom bugging me. There were lots of mundane objects and gave a more sinister feeling in the darkness. My wardrobe faced the bed and it was divided into 3 different small parts, each having its own door. One of the doors, the one in the middle, was slightly open. The inside was completely pitch black. That door was always closed, but I must have forgotten to close it in my tiredness. And I didn't have the energy to close it now. Above my wardrobe, I put a lot of old boxes and stuff that I don't use anymore. In the darkness they looked like small circular heads, all turned towards me. It was a creepy sight, and I couldn't help but wonder what it was. Smudging my eyes, I squeezed my eyelids to try to get a clearer image, but I still couldn't tell. My eyes had gotten more used to the darkness. There were still spots in my room that were pitch black, but I could tell between different shapes a bit easier. I could see the outline of the light switch which I felt drawn to. To the left of my bed there was a wide space. I had a table there, but oddly no chair. It broke a few days ago and I've been meaning to buy a new one. The table was filled with different books and papers that gave me a headache to just look at. On the ground, there was black carpet on the floor, the type made out of wool that always felt comfortable to walk on. A weird outline laid on top of it, as if there was creature right there, my size, that was staring right at me. I could almost make out its eyes. Was I hallucinating? I'd never done before, but I'd heard it was one of the side effects to sleep deprivation. The shape felt so real, but I must have been imagining things. I closed my eyes once again, and tried to wander off to sleep. But I was stuck here, my mind refusing to go into that defenseless state. Opening my eyes, I looked back at the closet. The door was fully open, and I could have sworn that it wasn't fully opened before. Maybe I'm just deleting things, the tiredness growing too bad. There was a circular shape inside of the darkness. The heads on top of the wardrobe were gone. Instead there was the flat edge of some old box, and nothing else. It soothed me as those shapes scared me a bit. But I guess that's the way the brain works at night, makes shapes where there aren't. The same thing happened to my carpet. There was nothing on it. Matter of fact, my room seemed normal again. My chair was empty and so was my table, and just because, I looked at the roof which was as boring as I expected. Maybe I had been in a dream. I usually don't have scary dreams, but there's a first for everything. I closed my eyes, and I tried to fall asleep once again. A few minutes later they shot open. I swore I heard something. It wasn't a sound from the outside, no car driving or wind blowing. This was something coming from my room. In a panic, my eyes scanned the room. There was nothing strange, but that feeling of something being off that wouldn't let me close my eyes. I had to find out what it was. Pushing the blanket off me, I climbed out of bed like an old man. My steps made the wood creak loudly. The light switch was right in front of me, but something told me not to flick it, that it was a bad idea. Nonsense, this was my own room. The light hurt my eyes and removed whatever sensitivity to the darkness they'd gotten. I groaned and covered them, and I cursed because this would surely mean I'd stay awake for another hour or so. After a while, I turned around and I saw exactly what I'd expected, nothing. I made sure, looking at my mat, looking at my table, at the empty ground in front of it, top of the wardrobe. There was nothing. It was completely ordinary. I had been paranoid, and I turned around ready to flick the light switch again and climb into bed when a small pestering thought crept into my mind. The wardrobe was closed. I felt both strange and normal about it. I always closed it, and when I imagined my room, it was always with the door closed, but I swore I'd seen it open before. I walked over to there, and I stood in front of the door. Anxiety welled up in my chest, but I swung the door open. Empty. I was sick of this, a clear waste time, no point in doing this. I turned around and once again, I was about to switch the flick when another thought snuck into my head. What about under my bed? I glanced there, it was completely pitch black. Each step I took there made my heart race more, my fingers tingle like hell and my breathing suddenly heavier. Something in me was convinced there was something beneath my bed, no matter how silly it sounded, but I slowly bent down to check. My muscles were more than ready to sprint towards the door at a moment's notice. I saw darkness, just as I'd expected, no face with wide eyes or monster, just darkness. I must have imagined the sound I heard earlier. I really needed to get to sleep, these hallucinations were getting worse. I slowly rose up, but the small time I'd stared into the blackness, my eyes had adjusted and what seemed to be just blackness now turned into a strange and ominous shape. It was circular, like a face, and pointed directly towards me. I felt some sort of hesitation coming from there, as if whatever it was unsure if I'd seen it. My calm expression said that I hadn't. Clearly, this was just my imagination running wild. I needed to get to sleep. It was probably some sort of card box. I rose up, but I felt unfinished. I'd already gone through the entire room, it didn't hurt to be thorough. I grabbed my phone which had a torchlight app. I felt my heart tingle more than beat, and the whole act felt wrong, as if certain parts of my body that had been dormant for most of my life were suddenly screaming. I took a step and then another step, and I stopped right beside the darkness. All I had to do was lean down and shine my light there and surely see nothing. Surely. But what if there was something below my bed? I couldn't shake that thought out. What would it do if it knew that I'd seen it? After all, it hadn't done anything so far, and I'd slept just like normal very long. If it didn't exist this didn't matter, but if it did exist, it also didn't matter, as long as I didn't check. I placed my phone on the table, and switched the lights off. It took me another few agonizing and sweaty hours to fall asleep, and it was the worst sleep I've experienced in my life. When I woke up, my head ached, and the alarm pounded in my ears. My phone was much closer than it usually was. I swear I'd placed it on my work table, but it was now just to the left of my head, on the small bedside table. And the light was on.